In 1908, something exploded over Siberia. With the force of around 1,000 Hiroshima bombs, it flattened 80 million trees across an area bigger than a major city. And when scientists finally reached the site, there was no crater, no impact site, no meteorite, nothing. Just millions of trees, all pointing away from a center point, like a shockwave from nowhere. Over 100 years later, we're still not entirely sure what it was. On the morning of June 30th, 1908, witnesses near the Tunguska River saw something extraordinary. A blue-white light, brighter than the sun, streaking across the sky, followed by a flash and a shockwave that knocked people off their feet, dozens of miles away. Windows shattered as far as 400 miles from the epicenter. Seismic stations across Europe and Asia recorded the shockwave, and for several nights afterward, the sky glowed strangely, even thousands of miles away in Europe. But because the impact site was so remote in dense, largely unpopulated Siberian forest, nobody actually investigated the site itself for almost 20 years. When a Russian scientist named Leonid Kulik finally reached the area in 1927, what he found stunned him. An estimated 80 million trees, flattened across roughly 830 square miles, all knocked down in a radial pattern, pointing outward from a central point. Exactly what you'd expect from a massive airborne explosion. But at the very center, Kulik expected to find a crater, a clear point of impact. There wasn't one. Just a small cluster of trees still standing upright, oddly untouched, right at the epicenter. As if whatever caused this exploded in the air, never actually touching the ground at all. The leading explanation is an asteroid or comet fragment exploding in the atmosphere, known as an airburst. Scientists believe an object roughly 100 to 200 feet wide entered the atmosphere at extreme speed. The intense heat and pressure caused it to explode several miles above the ground before ever reaching the surface, releasing all of its destructive energy downward and outward in a shockwave instead of leaving a crater, which would explain the flattened trees, the radial pattern, and the complete lack of an impact crater. This kind of explanation matches a similar event that happened much more recently. In 2013, a smaller meteor exploded over Chelyabinsk, Russia, injuring over 1,000 people from the shockwave alone. Caught on dozens of dashcam videos, giving scientists real modern footage of an airburst in action, which gave researchers a modern reference point to compare against the Tunguska devastation, confirming that airburst, even without leaving a crater, can absolutely cause this scale of destruction. But a few unusual details about Tunguska still don't perfectly fit a typical asteroid explanation. No fragments of the object have ever definitively been found at the site, despite extensive searching, which has kept the door open for alternate theories, including a comet made mostly of ice, which would leave little physical trace. An object that could cause this much destruction and then essentially evaporate completely. Tunguska happened over an empty forest, by pure geographic luck. If the same object had entered the atmosphere just a few hours later, Earth's rotation would have placed a major populated city directly underneath it instead. Scientists today actively track near-Earth objects, specifically because of events like this, trying to identify potential threats years or even decades before they could ever reach us. Tunguska remains the largest impact event in recorded human history, and it happened only about 100 years ago, not in some distant prehistoric past, within the lifetime of people whose grandchildren are alive today, which makes it less a distant historical curiosity and more a genuine warning for the future. Space is bigger than we usually think about, and it occasionally reminds us exactly how exposed we are. 80 million trees, flattened in seconds, no crater, no definitive fragments, just devastation and an empty center. Over 100 years later, the full answer is still out of reach. If you want more real mysteries explained as clearly as the evidence allows, subscribe. Next week, we look at an entire Arctic culture that vanished and nobody knows exactly why.